I'm Charlotte Stewart-Jones. I'm an associate in the Global Commercial Disputes team of Reed Smith's London office.
And I'm Lucy Winnington-Ingram, and I'm also an associate in the London office of Reed Smith, and I sit within the International Arbitration Group.
So Lucy and I first got involved with Amicus as trainees at Reed Smith. We attended a sort of trainee pro bono fair, which is how we first became aware of Amicus's work.
And I think at the time they were looking for new people to come on and essentially take over a kind of leadership role of that partnership. And Charlotte and I both signed up for that as trainees, and we've held that role ever since. Often I think when people get more senior, sometimes they get replaced by more junior people who perhaps have more time, but Charlotte and I have clung on and refused to be replaced because we are so committed to our work with Amicus. I don't know about you, Charlotte, but I'd always been interested in death penalty work and human rights. And so when we were listening to, back in all that time ago now, when we listened to the Amicus presentation at the Pro Bono Fair, for me, it seemed like a perfect fit for the type of pro bono work that I wanted to be involved in.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. It was an ideal opportunity. And shortly after that, we actually had the opportunity to attend the Amicus training session, which was a really valuable experience to sort of learn a bit more about the US legal system and the particular issues and history of the death penalty in the United States, and also the sort of imbalance of resources and how Amicus's work and supporting the capital defense attorneys in the US makes such an important difference because they are so under-resourced.
I mean, I would strongly recommend the training to anyone watching this, and we recommend it within Reed Smith, and it's certainly very popular with our Amicus case team, but it's kind of structured in three parts. So I remember clearly the first evening, the welcome evening, we attended a talk from two individuals, Sonny and Peter, who had actually been on death row, and that was incredibly moving. And acts as a real kind of motivator for the work that we do with Amicus. Then on the Saturday, this is the first training weekend, it was essentially a kind of, as Charlotte said, a history of the death penalty, but also some very interesting statistics. And I remember in particular being very taken aback by hearing about the number of people who'd been executed and who had then subsequently, after their execution, been cleared with DNA evidence. And I mean, obviously, just one of those cases would be too many, but there was a surprising number. And I also remember being particularly taken aback by how jury selection works in the US, which is obviously totally different to how juries work over here in England and Wales, and how tilted it is in favour of the death penalty. So some really interesting background, really interesting facts and figures that came out of that. And then the remainder of the training was more practical. And I think it's a kind of an invaluable thing to do if you not if you want to be involved with Amicus, but also just more widely. It's something that not everyone knows about over here in England and Wales, in our jurisdiction. So I think it's very valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And the appeals process in particular is quite convoluted compared to in the United Kingdom. So it's very interesting to understand the legal system in a bit more detail, and also the standard that's required. So the fact that some of the judicial comments that you're entitled to a lawyer of your choosing, but there's nothing in the Constitution that says your lawyer has to be awake. There were some very shocking comments, yes. Which I hope are more historical, but some very interesting case law.
Yeah, and I know that many of our case team at Reed Smith have now been on that training. I think some people have even done refresher sessions, which actually I might do because it's coming up to, I think, almost 5 years since I did it now. So I might be keen to do that in the next kind of year or so. So we'd strongly recommend that. In terms of the type of work that we do with Amicus, so it's become increasingly varied. I think typically and historically, the work we most often assisted with was document reviews. So as Charlotte mentioned, and as I think a lot of people know, the trial team in the US who work on death penalty cases is very severely under-resourced. So our role at Reed Smith and Amicus's other kind of pro bono partners is to undertake an initial sift of all the documentation that's been provided in the case and flag relevant information. So, for example, some of the types of documents we've prepared from this sift include a dramatis personae or people's list, a chronology. There's also kind of a thought sheet about where we can pull out anything we think is particularly relevant to the case and the defense. So that was certainly, I think, almost all of the work we did when Charlotte and I first started in this role with Amicus. More recently, Amicus has collaborated with the Disco platform, and we undertook a review with them as part of that kind of collaboration. And that worked really, really well, actually, because Disco is essentially an online platform, like an online document database that allows you to very quickly sift through documents, but it also allows you to issue tag. So it took kind of all of our work that we've previously done on the doc reviews out of individual tables and put it all online on one platform. And I think our team found that incredibly helpful, and we were able to review, tens of thousands of documents, I think, in the end, as part of the Reed Smith case team. So I think that was a really great piece of work to be involved with. Then we've also been involved in some research projects for Amicus. So obviously, the confidentiality can't really go into the detail of what those have been about, but they could be looking at factual issues or legal points. And we've kind of pulled together smaller case teams who've assisted with that. And one of the quite nice things about those research projects is we work really closely with the trial team. So there's regular engagement with the trial team, calls, meetings, in order to really get to the bottom of what they're looking for and make sure that our research and work is really well focused, so to best assist them. And there's a lot of kind of back and forth. So it's a kind of continuing project. So that's something I know that our team have really enjoyed being involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we've also been working with the Florida Center for Capital Representation on a very interesting project in Florida, essentially compiling data of all cases involving first-degree murder charges since March 2016. And the reason that date was chosen is because that's when Florida's new death penalty statute was introduced after the decision in Hearst found that the previous statute was unconstitutional because it didn't provide for a unanimous jury verdict to impose the death penalty. And it also provided that the judge could override the decision of the jury. So we've been helping collect sort of a variety of data for every single case with other firms for every case in Florida since that date. And the idea is that it will hopefully help us to understand better which circumstances result in someone being sentenced to death and which don't, and the type of factors that apply, whether that's location, the victim, the type of crime, previous felonies, etc. So it will be a really important piece of research going forward to understand exactly why some people get sentenced to death and not others. And sort of the arbitrariness of the death penalty in general is something that has been the source of a lot of research and debate over recent years, and is certainly one of the probably one of the most commonly used arguments in favor of abolition. So that's been a really, really interesting project to be a part of.
Great as well, because it means that often our projects, they reach a natural end, so a document review or a research project, whereas that project's ongoing. So we have volunteers that have been involved now for many, many months and will continue to be involved. I think finally, I just want to say briefly kind of what Amicus means to Reed Smith as a firm and also to us individually. I know Reed Smith is extremely proud of its long-standing relationship and involvement with Amicus, and Amicus is one of Reed Smith's flagship pro bono projects. Charlotte and I feel very lucky that we run the Amicus team, because there's always tons of interest from Reed Smith who join us, so it makes our job very, very easy in bringing new people on. There's always a lot of enthusiasm. I mean, personally, the work that Amicus does is extremely important to me. And, you know, as a junior lawyer working with Amicus, that also kind of gave me an opportunity to develop my legal and leadership skills. So it was beneficial in many ways as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's been a hugely beneficial opportunity, both professionally and personally. As Lucy mentioned, developing those leadership skills from such an early stage in our careers has been very valuable. And also just having that opportunity to make a difference and to actually help a client who may have been treated very unfairly and may not have access to the resources they need to get the due process to which they're entitled. And so being able to actually contribute to that case has been such a unique opportunity that I'm very grateful for.